in terms of putting together the talk, what we think about is what are some of the bits that when we explain it, people go, oh God, that explains it, that makes some sense. Very simply the way to think about it is the human body is designed to deal with acute stress, which would have been, 10,000 years ago. You're walking along, out jumps a saber-toothed tiger, your body goes into a state of stress. Are you going to run? You're going to fight, flight, or freeze? And then hopefully, if you don't survive, it doesn't matter. if you do survive, then digesting the woolly mammoth you had for breakfast is not a physiological priority right now. You've got to run really fast to get away. But then fairly quickly, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in to then calm your whole system down.
Which is the calm side of the
Which is the calm side, yeah. When you're living with something like ME, chronic fatigue, that kind of thing, that effectively it's like the saber-toothed tiger is biting your bottom the entire time. You don't get that calming response because you don't have an end or understanding of what's happening, why it's happening, what you do, should you rest, should you not rest, and all that kind of stuff that goes on. So some of the work that one of the key things we do initially on the psychology side of the clinic is to really treat that maladaptive stress response, to really then effectively calm down the nervous system to get the body into a healing state. And then it's probably worth talk a little bit about one example on the physical side of the mitochondria, and then we'll zoom in a bit more detail in some other areas.
Okay. Actually, I've got the slide on the mitochondria coming up later anyway.
Okay.
So that's, I suppose, again, at this point, probably what's good to say is, as you were saying, if you now think where we are in that sort of little hierarchy, that we've done the sort of predisposing factors or the subtypes, we've looked at the triggers, and these are now the perpetuating factors, or kind of really, you're right, at the tip of the iceberg now. Because something like the mitochondrial function, I mean, that definitely, I have to say, was really, really exciting when that came out. And, we as a clinic, were, I think, sort of quite at the forefront. We picked up on it quite quickly. And of course, it got talked about a lot, and we had a lot of people coming in and say, right, I want my mitochondria tested, and, a lot of people that we've tested definitely show that their mitochondria is struggling. But I think what is important to see is, where we put this in the whole hierarchy. It is that visible tip of the iceberg, but a lot of other things would have had to have gone wrong by the time your mitochondria gives up. So I would not want to jump into treating the mitofunction first, because again, as I said, if there's, for example, just maladaptive stress response or a little, those sorts of problems on the background, if you're not digesting and absorbing, well, great, yeah, probably the supplements that we can give to kind of reboot the mitochondrial function can give you short-term support. But the idea is to create something that is lasting in a long-term recovery. So as soon as, in that sort of situation, as soon as you take the supplements out, if your digestion's still not playing ball, you're basically, again, just pulling the plug out. You're removing your supply line. Whereas my idea is definitely creating everything on such solid foundations that you only need kind of the initial push, and then your system can take over. But I'll talk a bit about the sort of mechanics of it as well in a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that's really key here is that the majority of people that come to the clinic, we have a bit of a reputation of being what people call last chance saloon, but they've tried everything else and then they come to us. And so there's a couple of things about that that are really interesting for us. Firstly, they've often done some of the basic stuff, but also when you've seen a good few thousand patients, you basically don't just get the research on what you're doing, you get to look at all the stuff they've done previously to see what's worked and what hasn't worked to then learn from that. But often what happens is a lot of nutritionists, what they're tending to do is to basically treat the symptoms, the obvious symptoms that present, by just treating that symptom. So for example, if somebody comes in with something like candida or gut dysbiosis, they'll just try and basically treat the candida like in a fairly traditional medical way of let's kill it and then try and replenish the system, rather than looking at why is their candida proliferating in the first place. So it tends to still be fairly symptom-based, a lot of traditional ways of working. So part of what Sanna is saying is that we're always asking, okay, that's the symptom, that's what's happening, but the question's why. And a lot of our experience has been to really track back, okay, so what's the kind of almost the key bit that when this is treated, then it's going to impact this, 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 and this. And sometimes it can be you have to either peel back layers or you have to work on various levels at different points. But one of the things that's really key for us is it's not about treating specific symptoms, and it's also not about, you know, we've all come across people that have improved or recovered for a while, and then it's not a lasting recovery. You know, people often ask me to do talks, so how about relapses? And the way that we see it is, if you've properly treated the core of what's happening on a physical side, a psychology side, a structural side, and that kind of thing, there should be no relapse. But if there's a relapse, you've missed something. Very often, it can be things like if someone does, you know, some of the more pop psychology processes are out there where, you know, in 2.5 days you just fix your stress response, but you don't deal with, for example, the underlying achiever patterns. The difficulty you've got is you can feel better for a while, but those old patterns then start to come in. Or if you've got really major underlying adrenal fatigue, you can calm the nervous system down, you'll feel better for a while. But if you don't fix it on a physical level, then again, you haven't got a lasting recovery. So maybe it's worth us, we'll come back to the mitochondrial stuff in a bit more detail, but the adrenals are quite a good example of something that's quite simple to talk about, that explains quite a lot of symptoms. So the danger is, what we talk about 2 or 3 bits, people then assume that that's the whole picture. But we're talking about, effectively, I don't know, maybe there's 25 or 30 different bits of this we could talk about. We've just picked a few, which are, say, easy to explain, and they're good in talks because people kind of sit there and go, God, that makes sense. So.